Boy, that's something we need to hear right now, isn't it? That no matter what it is you're going through, we hold on and we believe because God is always, always with us. So thank you so much for that, Meliana. Hey, it's good to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for joining us this weekend at South Bay Community Church. You know, last weekend, Cheryl and I weren't here. As you might have remembered, we joined 10 other people from our church, including Pastor Dave and Pastor James, to run in the Ragnar relay race from San Francisco to Napa Valley. This is the course map that we ran, starting down on the very bottom and all ending up on the other side of the bay in Napa. About 182 miles, a little less than 200 miles. And the race started at 6 o'clock in the morning last Friday, and we arrived at the start line. We were the first ones to go, and it was cold and it was dark. This is a picture a selfie that I took of us as we were getting ready to run. We borrowed the parking vest from the parking ministry, so that's what we were wearing, and we had some other things we had to wear in the dark. But Stacy, who is the second from the right, was our first runner, and she ran a dark trail along the coast and said that she was freaking out because there was all kinds of rustling in the bushes, and she said she saw a bunch of piglets cross her trail. And we thought, piglets? Are you kidding me? Those pink little things? And, she said, they weren't pink. They were brown and they had tails. And those were rats. And so after she finished her leg, she ran a couple miles. She handed off the baton to Cheryl, and she took off, and she ran across the Golden Gate Bridge, and this is something that she shot as she was running. And then we were waiting on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, waiting for her to cross, and I took this photo. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see the Golden Gate Bridge on the right-hand side, and it was still quite dark when we were out there, but the sun started to come up, and it was a great run. I ran a little bit later that morning. It was my first leg was a 4-mile long race, and this is me. I ran very, very slowly. I was checking my Facebook page on the whole time. Had to just check my friends, see what they were doing. And then I ended up at the Marin Community College, where I handed off the baton to Pastor James, and he just ran like the wind. He just took off. Meanwhile, our team was done. There were 12 on the team, so there's a van with 6 of us in the first one, and Sherry was part of it, Sherry was part of the second van, and those 6 led by Pastor James and Pastor Dave, and then they took off. So we went to get something to eat because we were hungry. It was mid-morning by then. By the time we were done, around 11 o'clock, I think. So we went to get something to eat. We checked into a cheap hotel, and we got a chance to shower and change. We changed into our running clothes for the next run, and before we knew it was our time to run again. And by the time I was handed the baton for the second leg of our run, it was almost midnight. So we ran early in the morning, went throughout the day, then we ran again around midnight. And by then it was freezing outside, and we had been running for about 18 hours at that point, and we still weren't done. We had a ways to go. And after we finished that second leg, we headed back to the hotel, again, took a shower, changed, took a quick nap, about an hour and a half maybe, and we were back out on the course at 4 a.m. for our final leg. And when we got out there at 4 a.m., it was dark and it was cold, and we had to put on these headlamps because we needed to see where we were going. This was kind of what we were doing, just to see. And then we had a little red blinker on the back of our vest so that so that people would know that we were there. And this is the team, by the way. This is us. And again, it was really crazy out there. And even with the headlamps, we still, a couple of our runners still fell because we're running out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I think there are grapevines and great plants out there in Napa, but we're running, and it's just this dark road. And sometimes, because although there are 3,000 runners, but they're interspersed between 180 miles, sometimes you go for miles and not see anyone in front of you and not see anyone behind you. I saw a lot of people. There are all these young ladies just whiz right past me all the time. But sometimes you go for a long distance, and Grace, she fell, hurt her shoulder. I believe she fractured her shoulder. And Peter also fell, and he sprained his ankle. But we're following. There were certain parts where you could follow the runners. No one followed me because I was going so slow. But we followed one of the runners up a hill, and this hill went for about 2 miles straight. Just this long hill, 2 miles, just going straight up. And I don't know how these guys ran that up there, but it was absolutely amazing. And again, we were kind of freaking out because we would be running for miles and miles in the dark, and you wouldn't see anyone, and we just kept hoping that Sasquatch wouldn't come out and grab you and take off. And again, we hoped that we wouldn't get lost, so we wouldn't miss a sign somewhere, miss a turn somewhere. And I remember standing in front of this church in Sebastopol, California, waiting for our next run. I think it was around 4 in the morning. And as I was standing there, I just kept thinking, why am I doing this? Like, I'm old. Why on earth did I not just sign up for the Torrance Turkey Trot? Why am I doing this? Why Ragnar? Because in Ragnar, you hardly sleep. You're bone tired. You're exhausted. It's dark. It's cold. You might get lost. You might hurt yourself. And I think one of my friends, Scott Shimada, said it well when he posted this on my Facebook page. He said, "You're all crazy." Just saying. You're all crazy. And I think that about sums it up. We're just a little crazy. We're a little touched in the head. And we didn't run some ordinary relay race around the track at North High School. We just decided to do something crazy. It was extreme, and it was radical. Well, today we're beginning a brand new series here called Living Radically. And if you're joining us for the first time, again, thank you so much. It is so good to have you here today. For the next few weeks, we're going to talk about what it means to live radically, because I really believe that that's how we're supposed to live. Now, the definition for radical in one of the dictionaries I read is this: it is far beyond the norm. That's the definition of the word radical. It's far beyond the norm. And that was Ragnar. It was far beyond the norm, not just an ordinary relay race, but far beyond the norm. It was radical. And that is how I believe God has called us to live our lives. As Christ followers, we are to live a life that is far beyond the norm, because that's how Christ lived his life, and that's how he taught his followers to live their lives. But that's not always the case. That's not always the case. These days, Christians aren't far beyond the norm. We're just like everybody else. We tend to be just like everybody else. I mean, Christians cuss like everybody else, and they lie like everybody else, and they sleep around like everybody else, and they drive like everybody else, and they get divorced like everybody else, and they get drunk like everybody else, and they watch porn like everybody else. And these days, there hardly seems to be any difference between someone who follows Jesus and somebody who doesn't. And so for the next few weeks, we're just going to explore what it means to live a life of radicality and how we can live a life that is far beyond the norm. And if there was ever a time when we need to be different in this world, it is today. We need to live a life that is far beyond the norm, that's set apart and different from everyone else. And like I said, if ever there was a time we need to live that kind of life, it is today. I want to begin our time in a word of prayer and just pray. And then after that, I want to just share some thoughts about the election, and then we'll get into today's message. All right, so we just join me. We'll just come before the Lord and ask him to bless us. Father, thank you. God, thank you so much for church. And I don't know what I do. I think that's probably the sentiment of most of us. We don't know what we would do if we didn't have a place to come and worship and focus our eyes on you in these really challenging and difficult days. God, this has been a week that has just been such a burden on so many of our hearts. And God, in the midst of it all, I really believe you call us to live a life of radicality. I believe you call us to be set apart and to live a life that is above the norm. So today, would you just show up here and speak to us? No one wants to hear from me. We want to hear from you. So speak to us. Holy Spirit, do a work through me and each one of us. I pray you'd help our hearts and our minds to receive what it is that we're about to hear. So bless us today, God. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Some of you woke up on Wednesday morning and you felt relieved and hopeful for our country. And then there were a whole bunch of you who woke up on Wednesday morning and you woke up and you were grieved and you were heartbroken and you were hurt and you were fearful for our country. And my heart goes out to all of you, especially to those of you who have felt dismayed by the election results. I want you to know that I felt a lot of those things actually before Election Day. My heart broke when the Republicans chose Donald Trump to be their nominee, and my heart broke when the Democrats chose Hillary Clinton to be their nominee, because I didn't believe that either of them possessed the characteristics that I felt were necessary to lead our country. Characteristics like virtue and integrity and honesty and humility and righteousness and godliness. Instead, what I saw was someone who was vulgar and egotistical and so much more, and someone who didn't tell the truth and who wasn't trustworthy and so much more. So, how did we get here? How did we get this? The fact that these two candidates were chosen by their respective political parties is, I believe, a reflection. It is a reflection of the moral character of our country. And that's why, more than anything else, this weekend after the election, my heart grieves for the United States of America, because I believe they represent where we are as a nation spiritually. And my heart grieves for our country, not because Donald Trump won, but because the election and its aftermath has exposed our national depravity. It has exposed the decadent and dark underbelly of our country. And the election in 2016 has given us a glimpse into what our country and what our people are really like, starting from the top all the way down to the bottom. And that is, we are ugly. We are depraved. We are corrupt. We are immoral. We are hate-filled, and we are selfish, and we are violent sometimes, and we are angry and wicked, and we are sinful, and we are so far from God. That's what I believe this election cycle has shown us, that we are a nation that is so far from God. And I've even seen it among those who call themselves Christians, who post less than gracious comments on their social media pages. And it just breaks my heart. It just saddens me so greatly. So how do we respond to this situation? How are we to live? What are we to do? Now, for all of you who are afraid of what a Trump administration might bring, imagine for a moment, if you can, what it must have been like for people of faith just like us, what it was like for them centuries ago to have lived under the oppressive Roman Empire, the oppressive Roman government. I know it's tough because it was a long time ago, but imagine this for a moment. Think about it. It was the Roman government that ordered the crucifixion of Jesus. It was a Roman governor named Pontius Pilate, who ordered his crucifixion. It was the government. It was the government, the Roman government, that sanctioned the persecution of believers, that Christians ought to be killed. Tacitus, who was considered Rome's greatest historian, he was a Roman senator, and he was not a Christ follower. Here's what he wrote about the persecution of Christians by Emperor Nero in 64 AD. I'll just put it up here for you. He wrote, "Nero falsely accused and executed with the most exquisite punishments those people called Christians. First, those were seized who admitted their faith, and then, using the information they provided, a vast multitude were convicted for hatred of the human race." Christians were persecuted and convicted of hating other people. They said they were haters. And sometimes we hear that even today. And perishing, they were additionally made into sports. They were killed by dogs by having the hides of beasts attached to them, or they were nailed to crosses or set aflame. And when the daylight passed away, they were used as nighttime lamps. Even though they were clearly guilty and merited being made the most recent example of the consequences of crime, so he thought Christians were guilty, people began to pity these sufferers because they were consumed not for the public good, but on the account of the fierceness of one man, Nero. Because of him, the government went after Christians. I mean, Nero was so ruthless. He ordered the murder of his own mother, had her bludgeoned to death with a knife. He ordered the beheading of his own wife, Octavia, and then he placed her head, and he placed it so that it could be displayed so that his mistress, Poppaea, could watch it and see it. And years later, he kicked Poppaea to death while she was pregnant. See, Nero was a madman, and he was in charge of the government. And imagine what it must have been like for Christ followers to live under that kind of tyranny. Now, here's what's remarkable. Those were the circumstances. That was the background for the Apostle Paul writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit this incredible letter to the believers in Rome. and he instructed them on how they ought to respond. Let me show you a little bit of what he wrote. If you brought your Bibles, turn to Romans chapter 13, or open up your Baywatch. The verses are listed there for you. You can also get your smartphone and open up the YouVersion Bible app. If you open up the YouVersion Bible app, click on the Events tab, and South Bay Community Church will pop up there. Just click on that, and all the notes will appear right there for you to take a look at. But here's what he wrote, just part of what he wrote to the Christians in Rome under these circumstances. Romans 13, starting in verse 1. He wrote, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed." You can stop right there. These are remarkable words by the Apostle Paul, given the circumstances, given the kind of conditions under which Roman believers had to live. Now, the three main ideas in this chapter, and let me just give you the first one. The first one is this: we need to submit. You can write that one down. We need to submit. Verse 1 says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities." Circle subject to. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. Subject to is the Greek word hupotasso. Now, the reason why I tell you it's in the Greek is because the New Testament, this was all written in the Greek because of the influence of Alexander the Great. He conquered that entire area at one point, and everybody spoke his language. It was Greek. So when the New Testament was written, it was written in the Greek. What you have in our Bible is an English translation, and sometimes the English doesn't translate well from the Greek. And the Greek tells us a lot more. So in the Greek, this word subject to is hupotasso, and it is a military term. See, our English translation doesn't tell us it's a military term. But it's a military term, hupotasso, and it means to line up under. And it speaks of soldiers lining up under their commander. And so Paul told the Roman believers that they were to line up under the Roman government. And think about, given the circumstances, what he said here was absolutely radical. This is insane. Rather than saying you need to rebel against the government, you need to fight against the emperor, he said you need to submit yourself to the government. You need to line up under their government, even though the government is hostile, even though the government is corrupt, even though the government is cruel, even though they hunt down and kill Christians. We are to line up under their authority. The Apostle Peter said something very similar. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. He said, be subject. There it is again. Hupotasso, line up under. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperors or supreme, or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God. All right, you underline that. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Again, there it is. Be subject to. Same Greek word. Peter said we are to line up under authority. Now, what's noteworthy about both of these passages is that there aren't any conditions. There aren't any conditions for doing what he said we should do. There are no conditions for submitting to authority. Neither Paul nor Peter said, if the emperor is evil, then this doesn't apply. You don't have to submit to them. Neither Paul nor Peter said, if the president is a bully, if the president is corrupt, you don't have to submit to them. Neither of them said, if the prime minister is not fair and just, then you don't have to submit to them. No, they said exactly the opposite. They said, submit. Be subject to the authority. No conditions attached. And why would they say this? Because according to verse 15, I told you to underline it, it was God's will. Submission was God's will. It was God's will that they submit because by submitting to their authority, they were, in essence, submitting to God. And when they resisted authority, in essence, they were resisting God. It was God's will. And if you look at Romans 13, the end of verse 1, put it up here again for you. Romans 13, at the end of verse 1 says, "For there is no authority except from God." There is no authority except from God. And verse 2 says, "Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment." You see, the reason we are to submit, the reason why Paul and Peter said we are to submit is because it is God's will, because God is the one who places those in authority. He is the one who places them there in the first place to lead us. He places people in authority, men and women in authority. God is the one who places leaders over us, whether they are good or whether they are bad. He appoints them. And other scriptures bear this out. Proverbs 8:15 says, "By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just." Underline, by me kings reign. It is by God's authority that he places someone in authority. Daniel 2:21, he changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. You underline, sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He sets them up. He puts them in positions of authority. And Daniel 4:17 says the sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will, and sets over it the lowliest of men. He gives authority to whom he wills. That's what the scriptures say. Right? He gives it to whom he wills. In John 19, and this is insane, Jesus told Pilate. Pilate was the governor of Judea. Pilate was the one who sentenced Jesus to crucifixion. Jesus answered him, John 19:11, Jesus answered him, you would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Jesus said to him, Pilate, the only reason why you can order my crucifixion is because God put you in authority in the first place. He was the one that allowed you to be the governor. It's amazing. See, that's what God does. That's what God does. He places leaders in authority, whether they're good or whether they are bad. And that's not to say, for example, that God is a Republican because Donald Trump is the president-elect. And that's not to say that he is a Democrat because Barack Obama is our current president. The scriptures don't explain to us and tell us why he chooses whom he chooses. But that's what he does. He chooses whom he chooses. What's important for us to remember is that we are to submit. And I also want you to know, it's important to know that not every leader is God appointed, or God anointed, I should say. Not every leader is God anointed, but every leader is God ordained. God ordains every leader to be a leader, but not every leader is anointed. Some leaders are very evil, and some leaders are very wicked and despicable, and some are despots, and some are dictators. But it is God who places them in positions of authority, and it is our responsibility to submit to them. We need to line up under their authority. And one of the ways that we can do that is by praying for our leaders. We need to pray for our leaders. You know, shortly before the Apostle Paul was released, shortly after he was released from prison, a Roman prison, for preaching the gospel. He was incarcerated for preaching the gospel. Here's what he wrote to Timothy, one of his proteges, 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. He wrote, "First of all, then, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings, and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way." Here is another radical, outrageous statement. Paul said that we are to pray and be thankful for kings and for all who are in authority over us. And practically speaking, that meant Paul was urging his people to pray for those who had imprisoned him, the corrupt Roman government. And guess what happened after he wrote this? They put him right back in prison. He was in prison until he died. And that's what we need to do as well. Our responsibility is to pray for our leaders and to pray for our new president. Now, how do we do that? And that's what we did, by the way. When Barack Obama was reelected president 4 years ago, we took some time here in our service to pray for him. And then when he was elected for the very first time, we took some time to pray for him. We want to pray for our presidents that they are successful so that our nation can live in peace. So how should we pray for our president? How should we pray for the president-elect? Well, when God chose Abraham to lead the nation of Israel, when he chose him to lead his people, God's hope for Abraham is that he would rule with righteousness and justice. Take a look at Genesis 18, verse 19. It says, "For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice." There's the key, righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. All right? So he wanted him to rule with righteousness and justice, and I think that's a great concept here, great idea here. And I believe that that's how we ought to pray for Donald Trump, that he will reign, that he will rule as president with righteousness and justice. So that's how we ought to pray. Right? So submission, lining up under authority is our first radical response to this election. Regardless of who the president is, we need to line up under the government and pray for our leaders. You know, in 1979, this man here, Johnny Lee Clary, was the imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in Oklahoma. And in 1979, he met this man, Pastor Wade Watts, of the Jerusalem Baptist Church. Met him at an Oklahoma City radio station for a debate. They were going to debate. Before they went on the air, Pastor Wade, when he first saw this white supremacist, first thing he said to him was, "Hello, Mr. Clary. I just want you to know that I love you and Jesus loves you." Clary replied by cussing at him, by hurling epithets at him, and then the debate began. And according to witnesses, it was intense. And Johnny argued that blacks needed to be separated, segregated from whites. And Reverend Wade refuted his claims with scripture by quoting the Bible. At the end of the debate, Pastor Wade said to Johnny, here's the quote, "God bless you, Johnny. Nothing you do can make me hate you. I'm going to love you and pray for you whether you like it or not," unquote. Well, after the debate was over, Pastor Wade was barraged with hate phone calls, threatening phone calls. Crosses were burned on his front lawn, and then the Klan torched his church and nearly burned it down. One day, Pastor Wade received a call from Clary. Another one of these are called from Johnny Clary, and it was another one of these threatening calls. And he called and he disguised his voice, but Pastor Wade knew exactly immediately who it was, and he greeted him saying, "Hello, Johnny. Hello, Johnny. A man like you takes time to call me. Let me do something for you." And he began to pray for him right there over the phone. He began to pray for him, and here's what he prayed: "Dear Lord, please forgive Johnny for being so stupid." And then he invited him to dinner. Of course, he turned it down, but years passed, and Johnny rose higher and higher up the ranks of the Ku Klux Klan. And then his life started to fall apart. He was tailed everywhere he went by the feds, and there was infighting in the group. And one day Johnny couldn't take it anymore. He had it. He decided to kill himself. Right when he reached for his gun, a ray of sunlight burst into his room, and that sunlight just shined right on the Bible that was there on the table. He looked. He saw the light was shining on the Bible. He set down his gun. He picked up the Bible, opened up, and started reading it. And he read it, and he read it, and he read it. Read it for hours, according to the account. Read it for hours, and after he was done, he cried out to God, and he gave his life to Christ. A couple years later, he finally called Pastor Wade to tell him what had happened, how he was wonderfully converted to Christ. And then he told him that he felt like God was calling him into the gospel ministry. Reverend Watts, Pastor Wade, said to him, quote, "How about you preach your first sermon in my all-black church," unquote. And Johnny said, "Sounds like a good idea, I'll come." That Sunday, half the congregation boycotted the service. At the end of the sermon, Johnny gave an altar call, and a 14-year-old girl came forward to give her heart to Christ. It was Pastor Wade's youngest daughter. She was the only one in the family that's still not given her heart to the Lord, and that day she did. From that day forward, Johnny and Pastor Wade became a preaching team, and they went all around the country telling people about Jesus. Pastor Wade went to heaven in 1998. And after he died, here's what he had engraved on his tombstone: "I'd give up silver and gold to have it said that I helped someone." And he did. He sure did. He helped a lot of people. Do you know why? Because he loved radically. he loved radically. He loved his neighbor as himself. Not only that, he loved his enemies like Jesus told him to. Let me ask you something. Do you love like that? Do you love like that? Do you love radically? Even the people who hate you, even people you can't stand because of this election. If I told you that President-elect Donald Trump was going to be here at our church next week to speak, would you boycott the service? Or would you be gracious and come to hear him speak? If I told you that Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming to our church next week to speak, would you boycott the service? Or would you graciously come to hear her speak? Here's what Paul said about love, continuing on in Romans chapter 13, starting in verse 8. That's on the first page again. He said, "Owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law." That's right. So in this passage, you can stop right there. In this passage, Paul cites 4 of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. But he says these commandments are summed up in this one word, in this one command. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And at the end of verse 9, would you just underline it? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And who's your neighbor? Your neighbor, in the context here, is anyone you're in contact with. It's not simply the guy you live next to. It is anyone that you have contact with. And then in this command, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Double underline, triple underline, circle as yourself, because as yourself is the key to understanding what it is this is saying. And by the way, this entire command comes from Leviticus 19. But the key to loving radically are these last 2 words, as yourself. We need to love others as we love ourselves. Now, loving your neighbor as yourself presupposes that you love yourself. It presupposes that you already love yourself. Self-love is a given. Now, when I say self-love, I don't mean like, I just love myself. I love myself. Oh, that's not what this is talking about. Self-love is this idea that we are all predisposed to putting ourselves first and ahead of everyone else. Right? We are hardwired. God hardwired us with an instinct for self-preservation and self-satisfaction. We all have it. Is there anything wrong with it? It's in our DNA. We're always concerned about ourselves. Right now, one of the reasons why the Ragnar relay race is so challenging is because it not only tests your physical endurance, but it also tests your self-love. Test your self-love. You know, our last run started around 4 a.m. in the morning. It was freezing outside. It was cold outside. And, you know, all we're wearing are running clothes because we're getting ready to run again, right, Sherry? We're wearing our running clothes, our shorts, and our dry-fit shirt. And every time somebody was going to run, get ready to run, first of all, they have to wait for the other runner to come in. They get the baton, and then they take off. But every time somebody was going to run, we'd get out. It was at the exchange. We would get out, and we would all wait for the runner to come in, and we would cheer them on. And so we're out there like, okay, hurry up. Where is Sherry? She's running so slow. Hurry up, Sherry. We're waiting for Sherry to come in, and then she hands off the baton to Jason, and he takes off, or whoever she hands off the baton to. For example, this is Kyle. This is during the day. He's coming in. He's getting ready to hand the baton off to Jason. And in the day, it warmed up a little bit, so I ran without my shirt, too. I looked hot. And it's too bad nobody took a photo. I'd have put it up here for you. But every time there was a baton exchange like this, we would all get out of the van. And we would just wait there at the exchange point, just waiting for the other runner to come in. And then once the other runner took off, we all jumped back in the van. Well, it was around 5 o'clock in the morning. And my self-love kicked in. And I said, I don't want to get out of the van. I don't want to get out of the van. I'm cold. I'm freezing. I'm tired. I just want to take a nap. I mean, I don't want to get out. I want to sleep. And I thought all those things. I actually thought all those things, but I knew I couldn't say it because this is Pastor Gary. And sometimes this is one of those times I wish that I wasn't a pastor, because if I wasn't a pastor, I'd say, I'm not getting out. I'm too cold. I'm tired. I don't care. I'm going to sleep. Right? Loving your neighbor as yourself means I'm cold, I'm freezing, but I'm going to get out there and I'm going to cheer for you until you get that baton and keep running on that race. Loving your neighbor as yourself says, I'm cold and I'm freezing, but here's my Hello Kitty blanket. You can have it. And that's what Cheryl did. She took her Hello Kitty blanket, and she gave it to Stacy. And I thought, why didn't you give it to me? I'm your husband. I'm freezing. But she gave it to her. Loving your neighbor as yourself means I know you're tired. Why don't you stay in the van? You catch a few winks. I'll go out there and I'll cheer for everybody. You just get some rest. That's loving your neighbor as yourself. Imagine how different our nation would be if we just loved our neighbor as ourselves. Imagine what would happen instead of us firing back at the haters, that we did what Pastor Wade did and just loved the haters. What if instead of reacting harshly and sarcastically to someone's Facebook post about the election, what if we just didn't say anything? Because if you said something, it just might exacerbate the situation and make it worse. What if instead of lashing out at the protesters who blocked the freeways and burned the American flag, what if you just, instead of saying it, you just quietly prayed for them? Because they need Jesus too. And what if instead of labeling somebody who voted for Trump as a bigot, how about if you just showed them grace, because grace is greater? What if instead of dismissing or minimizing someone's pain over the election results, what if you just try to understand how it is that they were feeling and you pray for them too? See, what we need right now more than anything else is love. And again, it just blows me away that Paul wrote these words to the believers in Rome at a time when they were being persecuted like crazy and the government was going after them simply because they were Christians. It was as if Paul wrote these words to the United States of America in the year 2016. We need the love. Would you write that one down? We just need to love each other. So I want to ask you to do something. Now, would you all just stand for a second? I'm going to ask you to do something that might make some of you a little bit uncomfortable, but too bad. Would you all just stand? Everyone stand. Okay, everybody stand. Everybody stand. And here's what I want you to do. Would you just turn around and give some of the people around you a big hug? Just give them a hug, okay? Okay, that's enough. You guys are getting a little carried away. I know you like that. What if we did that everywhere we went? Boy, these guys are just getting carried away over here like, wow. Hey, over here too. Yeah. What if we did that everywhere we went? We just showed love to people. We could change this world. And it's up to us to change the world. Right? It's not the government that's going to change the world. I mean, this week, here's your assignment, here's your homework, right? This week, you meet somebody, it might even be a stranger, and they're having a hard time with the election. Just go and give them a big hug. In fact, somebody came up with the idea during our break, said, what if we just went out where all those protesters are, and we just hold up these signs and say, need a hug? And everyone's going to come and just give them a hug, right? Doesn't matter what they believe, doesn't matter what you believe, we just show God's love. But that's what we need to do. You know, Paul, let me close with what Paul had to say, Romans 13, going back to Romans 13, verse 11. Here's how he closed it off. He said, verse 11, besides this, you know the time, that the hour has come for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we first believed. The night is far gone, the day is at hand. So then, let us cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. That's how he closed it off. And I love this because Paul said in verse 11, first of all, we need to wake up, right? Some of you, if there's someone falling asleep next to you because I'm a boring message, just hit them in the ribs for me real quick. We need to wake up. But that's not the sleep that he was talking about. That's not the kind of waking up that we are used to. When he said wake up from your sleep, he was actually referring to spiritual apathy. He said, you need to wake up from your spiritual apathy, because the people in Rome, Christians in Rome, they were kind of spiritually apathetic. They were kind of lukewarm in their faith. In other words, what Paul was saying was, you need to get serious about God. It is time to get serious about God. It is time to stop straddling the fence and have one foot in the world and one foot in your relationship with God. It is time to get serious about God, and it is time to stop being spiritually apathetic. It's time to get serious about God. Why? Because he said in verse 11, salvation is nearer than it's ever been. Would you just underline salvation is near? This isn't referring to getting saved and getting Jesus. This is a reference to Christ's return. It's a reference to Christ's return. Paul said that the church needs to wake up because Jesus is coming real soon. And I really believe that. I really believe we're living in the last days. I don't know when Jesus is going to come. He could show up tonight in the rapture and take the church home. But I just know that we don't have a lot of time. And it may not be for 50 years, but it's time to get serious about God, because salvation is nearer than it's ever been. And in order to be radical, the first thing he said we need to do is cast off the works of darkness. Notice that? Cast off the works of darkness. Verse 12. Darkness is a metaphor for sin, right? And so this is a reference to spiritual darkness. And when Paul wrote this, Rome was as spiritually dark a place as you could find on planet Earth. And he said, as I said at the beginning, is that what this election has shown us is that our nation is a spiritually dark place, right? Our nation is a dark spiritual place. That's why sin is why there's so much division. Sin is why there's so much hate. Sin is why there's so much evil. About a little more than a month ago, my daughter Kylie's car got broken into in the middle of the night. It was Sunday morning, in fact, before church. Came and someone smashed her window and took some things out of her car. About 2 weeks later, someone, in the middle of the night, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, someone ripped the catalytic converter out of Natalie's car as well. And we went to get a quote on that. The reason we knew because we heard the alarm go up, and neither of us wanted to go outside. Cheryl, go outside, see who that is. I'm not going outside. You go out. I'm not going outside. Well, the mechanic told us it would cost $2,700 to replace the catalytic converter. And we called the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department told us that the state of California, our government, has decriminalized theft, which means that if you steal something, it is no longer a felony. It is a misdemeanor, which means you won't even go to jail for it. And so he said, as a result, robbers and thieves don't go to jail. As a result, crime has shot up. Lawlessness has shot up. There is more and more people stealing things because they know they're not going to go to jail for it. They just get slapped on the wrist and they're on their way and they go keep stealing. And now that we've legalized marijuana, more people will be addicted to drugs, and there's going to be more theft and there's going to be more stealing. So you all just need to be careful out there, right? But Paul said we need to put off the darkness. We need to put off the sin, and he actually gives us a short list of some of the things that we need to put off. Like he says, sleeping around, sexual immorality, getting drunk, fighting, and jealousy, and of course there's a whole lot more. But we need to put these things off, because they're not becoming of a Christ follower. Let me ask you something. When you come to church, you're all on your best behavior, right? You're all on your best. Everyone is on their best behavior, right? But what's your behavior like after you leave church? What are you like after you leave, when you tear out of here on 190th Street? What's your behavior? What are your actions like? How is your language? How do you speak to your spouse? Or how do you speak to your children? How do you speak to your parents? Or how do you speak to your boss? What are the kind of things you post on your Facebook page or on your Twitter? How do you drive? How do you treat others? How do you treat someone of the opposite sex? Do you treat them, and do you speak to them, and do you behave when you leave this place in ways that are worthy of the name of Christ? If not, that means there's sin in your life, and you just need to put off darkness. You need to put it off. You need to ask for forgiveness and repent and turn around and change. And then, according to verse 12, we need to put on the armor of light. We need to put on the armor of light. See, darkness is a metaphor for sin. Light is a metaphor for righteousness and goodness. And we need to put on the light. You can write that one down. It's your final point. I need to put on the light. And if you're wondering what this is supposed to look like, you just look at verse 14. And Paul says, we need to put on the Lord Jesus Christ. So putting on the light is synonymous with putting on Jesus, so that when people look at you, they don't see you, they see Jesus. We want people to see the Lord in us. You know, you want your spouse to see the Lord in you. You want your children to see the Lord in you. You want the people you work with and the people you go to school with and even the people as you're driving down the street to see Jesus in you and not you. So we need to put on the light. We need to put on Jesus. You know, putting on the light is not synonymous with putting on your political views. I think sometimes we get so consumed with trying to get someone to believe and vote like we believe or vote like we vote, and it becomes a stumbling block. What we ought to be concerned about, what we ought to be more concerned about is winning that person to Jesus and telling that person about Jesus than telling them that Trump is wrong or Clinton is wrong. And we need to tell them about Jesus. And so I can't think of a better response to this election than what Paul had to say in Romans chapter 13. We need to submit, and we need to love, and we need to put on the light and be like Jesus. Well, I'm going to close by showing you something that I found recently that really touched me. Take a look at this. You know, I love that video. But it also makes me kind of sad to think that a dog can bring people together and not us. It ought to be us. It ought to be the church. It ought to be people who love God, who are so filled with the love of God. We ought to be the ones that bring people together. We ought to be the ones who unite each other and bring healing to our nation. You know, there are going to be some challenging days ahead. But let's unite, first of all, as a church. Unite in our love for Jesus. And then let's be more concerned about sharing God's love with someone than sharing our political views with someone. Because it's more important they know Jesus than they vote the way that we voted. See, when we get to heaven, there aren't going to be any Republicans or Democrats, liberals or moderates or conservatives. They're just going to be people who love Jesus. And as this election showed us, this country needs Jesus. And it's up to us to go out there and tell them. So let's be gracious to those who are hurting over this election. Let's be gracious to those who voted for Trump. Let's just love each other. And let's pray for Trump, that he will rule with righteousness and justice. Let's close our time in a word of prayer. As you have your heads bowed and your eyes closed, I want to give you an opportunity to just say whatever it is that you want to say to God. First is this. Maybe you came here today and you've been spiritually lukewarm. You've been asleep at the switch. You're spiritually apathetic. You're just so-so. You're not serious about God. Would you just tell him today that you want to get serious about him? That you're going to follow him with everything that you have? Will you just take a minute to tell him that? Ask him to forgive you and tell him what it is you want to do. Second, maybe your life is consumed with darkness. And maybe you're one of those folks and you post all these things on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. They got people riled up. And your life is consumed with darkness because you do some of the things that you shouldn't be doing, that are not honoring to Christ. Why don't you confess that to him? Ask God to forgive you. And tell him that you want to put all those things off and never do it again. Whatever that is, whatever darkness it is, whatever sin it is you're dealing with, just ask God to forgive you. And then put on Jesus. Put on light. Tell him you want to be like him and live for him. Will you tell him that? Father, it's hard to understand how it is that Christians like us suffered so much. They were thrown to animals and they were beheaded and burned at the stake. And maybe now we know why. It was so that Paul's words would ring so true in our hearts today. Even though those things aren't happening to us, it's so easy for us to feel disgruntled and upset about what's going on in our country. We thank you for his words and the reminder, God, that we are to submit to those who line up under authority, to those who are over us. And that doesn't mean we can't go out and protest and exercise the First Amendment rights. We're just so thankful we live in a country where we can do that. But God, help us as a people of faith, as a community of faith, to remember what we're really all about. And that's not about trying to get someone to vote like we vote, but it's about telling people about you, because that's what our country needs more than anything else, is you. So help us as a church to go out there. We want to put off our darkness. Forgive us for our sins. We want to put on light, and we want to love our neighbor, even our enemies, as ourselves. And if we can do all those things, God, I believe you can use us to bring healing to our nation, to bring healing to our families, and bring healing to our communities. And you can use us to unite people if we just share that love. If a dog can do it, God, how much more can we do it? So help us, God. Use us, God, in the days ahead, that we might become an instrument not of division, but of love and of light and of unity. Thank you, Father, so much. We love you. And by the way, God, we do pray for Donald Trump. Help him to rule and to lead with righteousness and justice so that our nation will be blessed. Thank you, Father. In Jesus' name, amen.